Well, hello there.
Howdy, y'all.
How you doing on this fine evening? Can I get you something to eat?
On this muggy summer Alabama afternoon, evening, I would love some fried green tomatoes.
Absolutely. I will go straight into the back and get those for you. I've
Thank
also
you.
been barbecuing for a week, so
Incredible.
yeah. All right. Yeah, sorry I didn't prepare a bit. That wasn't very funny, but here we are. We're doing it. It's Rough Draft, your favorite Boozy Book Club podcast with really, really fun and creative hosts. What are you
It's
drinking?
been a couple of weeks. We've had a couple of weeks off, so
Yeah,
I feel like you get a pass.
Rusty.
I am drinking a White Claw tonight. What about yourself?
That's incredible. I am drinking straight bourbon whiskey because we are in the South.
Nice.
And it's from the Berkshire Mountain Distillery, in case you're wondering, which is in Massachusetts.
That's not in the South.
No, but it's like sort of local to me.
Right. So today on Rough Draft, your favorite Bluesy Book Club blobcast, we're reading Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fanny Flagg. Do you want to hear about friend of the podcast, Fanny?
Please, yes.
Okay. Close friend of the podcast, Fanny, was actually born Patricia Neal in 1944. And besides being the author of this book, she's also an actress and comedian. She was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, where the book is set, and eventually became an actress after trying out for the Miss Alabama pageant. But after she was denied a raise, she quit her job and moved to New York City, which I thought you would love. She began her acting career there, but couldn't use her birth name because there was already a well-known actress named Patricia Neal. And so she basically had an hour to come up with the name Fanny Flagg. And the first name was at the suggestion of her grandfather, and her last name was at the suggestion of a friend, which is just really chaotic energy that I love for her. I'm going to focus a little bit more on her career as an author, but she, in 1960, while she was in New York, she started writing skits for the New York nightclub Upstairs at the Downstairs, and was invited to be a staff writer on the show Candid Camera because of that work, and she later became a performer there as well. And then she won first place for a fiction novel for a short story at the Santa Barbara Writers Conference. Her novel Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, which we'll be reading today, was on the New York Times bestseller list for, 36 weeks. And it was praised by Harper Lee herself. So that is quite the commendation. She's written other books, including a cookbook for the Whistle Stop Cafe, and actually most recently in October 2020, a sequel called The Wonder Boy of Whistle Stop, which follows one of the characters that we'll be talking about today. Flagg is dyslexic, which she's spoken publicly about. She's talked about having to overcome how discouraged she was from writing because it was hard for her to spell. And then once that she actually found out about and was able to look more into the fact that she was dyslexic, she was able to overcome that, and talks about it a lot. In the mid-1970s, Flagg had a relationship with American writer Rita Mae Brown, who she met at a party in Hollywood Hills. And she was also...
That's included. They met at a party. Ooh.
They met at a party. And she was also connected to the Bold and the Beautiful actress Susan Flannery. And by connected to, I mean she lived with her for 8 years.
So they were friends?
So they were really good friends. Much like the two main characters of our story, who are also really, really good friends. The best of friends. Speaking of them, do you want to tell us about Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe?
I would love to. And buckle up, you guys, if you...
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm so sorry. I'm literally so sorry. I pulled this up and I told you I was going to talk about this. Okay. Listen.
I'm listening.
In In Irondale, which is close to Birmingham, is where like the original, or not the original, but like where a cafe that got
That's where this
famous.
town is based on. Yeah.
Yeah, which is where this town is based on, is where the Irondale Cafe is, and that cafe got famous because of the movie Fried Green Tomatoes. Um, and I was reading over the like bio of that cafe, and they talk about how they serve like 600 to 800 slices of fried green tomatoes a day, which is wild because they're only open for like 4 hours, Sunday through Friday. And then also there is an annual Whistle Stop Festival in Huntsville, Alabama every single year. And we actually just missed it. It was August 13th and 14th, 2021 this year.
Wow.
But there is like a whole barbecue competition. And they had Leonard Skinner and Santana, Tom Petty, and the Doobie Brothers were there.
What?
That's what I'm saying. And so
of course, I bet Leonard Skinner is there every fucking year.
Yes. Oh my god. Can you imagine how fucking wild it gets when they play Sweet Home Alabama?
Okay. So first of all, we're gonna go.
Yes, that's exactly. I was like, you have to come down next year for the Whistle Stop weekend.
We're gonna go to Whistle Stop Fest. Yes, that is the other thing that I was going to say, is that I had seen this movie, but I forgot that it's like so deeply set in Birmingham and its suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my girlfriend's favorite book, and we were like in Birmingham, and I like obviously did not have the presence of mind to go to the Irondale Cafe. So now like that's something that has to be remedied as well.
Yes.
But yeah, we can go to Whistle Stop Fest. We'll have a great time. Do you want to know what happens in this book?
Yes, now I do. I'm so sorry. I had to add that last part in.
It's important, and thank you for telling me, because
of
that
course
is incredible information. Okay, so if you guys have seen this movie, buckle up, because like it's like a lot of it's the same, but there's just a lot more in the book. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I
There's
was
a lot.
distracted by Trevor.
Yeah, I know. What do you want?
It's like, it's in Huntsville. I don't think it's the cafe, and it's all tribute bands. It's not...
But there's a barbecue competition.
I get that. But I think Whistle Stop towns are just train towns. I think that's something else.
We're going to the Whistle Stop Festival, and then we're going to the Irondale Cafe.
Irondale has something.
Okay, are you done being inside of my asshole now? I'm trying to record a podcast.
Yeah, just edit.
Just edit. Did you hear that editing, Kirsty? Oh my god, you can get mad about this all over again in like 2 weeks when we actually end this episode. Okay, I'm so sorry. Please, before Trevor interrupted you. Go ahead.
Do I need to like beat on my microphone so editing Kirsty hears that?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Here we are. We're going to talk about the plot of the Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, which I did actually prepare for this week. Everybody clap for Carissa actually doing her fucking job and like putting a modicum of effort into this. Okay, so there's a lot of sort of storylines happening at once here that jumps around in time a lot, but I'm going to go in a different route to summarize it. So our sort of outside frame is the present day of when this book was written, which is in the 80s. And so our outside frame is the story of Evelyn Couch and her friend Ninny Threadgood. So Virginia Threadgood, known as Ninny, was orphaned and subsequently raised by the Threadgood family in Whistle Stop, Alabama. She ended up marrying one of the members of that family, Cleo Threadgood, and like growing old in that town. She has a friend, Mrs. Otis, who is also old. That's like, we don't really see her ever. But Mrs. Otis is committed to an elderly care facility called Rose Hill, and they ask Ninny to accompany her and be her roommate so that she can be comfortable in this elderly care facility. Evelyn Couch is a middle-aged woman who comes to Rose Hill to visit her mother-in-law, who is like really chaotic, and going through some stuff. We're not really privy to what that is, but she really sort of hates Evelyn. So Evelyn and Ed come to see her every week, and eventually Ed is like, Evelyn, just like, can you just like wait outside so my mother doesn't throw things at you? And so she goes to the sort of central lounge area and starts talking to Ninny. And they form this sort of unlikely friendship where Evelyn is going through a little bit of a midlife crisis. She's like really unhappy in her marriage. She's going to a bunch of classes to sort of try to get this marriage back on track. She is a compulsive snacker. Like every time we see her, she's got a real variety of candy bars and other sort of pre-wrapped treats. Which is it's one of my like favorite sort of recurring bits in the novel is like every time she shows up she has a different
pre-wrapped treat.
Like a candy bar, like a little Debbie, you know. And it's really, really relatable.
Absolutely, yeah.
But she's also like very concerned about gaining weight because she's really like wanting to be this image of like a perfect Southern wife. So her friendship with Ninny helps her in two ways. First of all, Ninny's like, yo, it sounds like you're going through menopause and you should just get some hormones. And Evelyn's like, what? And she's like, yeah, it's like a medical thing. You can get help for that. And she also tells stories about her past and the town of Whistle Stop and her sister-in-law, Iggy, whose individuality inspires Evelyn to take charge of her life. So by the end of the book, Evelyn has a successful career selling Mary Kay cosmetics. Yes, we love a MLM queen. But she's also like, she's much happier. She's like doing this stuff on her own and she's taking care of herself, and she has gotten treatment like for her menopausal side effects. Ninny is able to return back to her home after the nursing facility and passes away there at her home, which is nice because that's where she wanted to be. And she wills Evelyn a box of like sort of memorabilia from her childhood because she knows that Evelyn has like the ability to remember and honor like all of these people that were part of Ninny's life. So that is our outside framing device. Obviously, like I said, Ninny is telling the stories of her childhood and of Whistle Stop, and that's where we get into sort of the meat of the novel, which is told between both Ninny's stories. There are some like just like straight third person written descriptions of what's happening in this time, and then we also have the what is her name? The Weems Weekly, yes,
Dot,
which is
yes.
Dot Weems, who is just like a resident of the town who runs a weekly newsletter about just like things that she thinks are interesting and also like how her husband is being annoying that week.
But she loves him.
Yeah. Okay. So the primary story, and these flashbacks take place in like the 2030s and 40s. In the town of Whistle Stop, Alabama. So the primary story of this section is the story of Iggy and Ruth. Iggy is the youngest Threadgood child. There are like a lot of them. The rest of them are like, their names are not really important, but I'll like let you know. But Iggy is the youngest. Her name is Imogene. She goes by Iggy. She grows up really, really close to her brother Buddy, who is like a famously suave sort of dude. I don't know. Everybody likes him. And he gets run over by a train, which really obviously traumatizes Iggy, especially since he was like her only confidant. So she sort of responds in a lot of different ways. She like doesn't know how to process her anger and her sadness. She has a lot of temper tantrums. She like runs away a lot. As she gets older, she starts indulging in drinking and gambling with her and her brother's friends down by the river. Iggy is also like a major tomboy, like very, very queer coded because like she's always wearing overalls. Like that's a big plot point is that she's always wearing overalls. And she likes to climb trees. and do outside stuff. And there is like a sort of pivotal scene where she is sort of having a big emotional reaction to being forced to wear a dress.
She literally vows never to wear a dress ever again in her life.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Which, like, fair.
Yeah.
So that's Iggy. Ruth Jameson is our other sort of primary character in this storyline. She is from Valdosta, Georgia, and she spends a summer with the Threadgoods while she's teaching Sunday school at the local church. And she and Iggy get very close. At some point, Iggy is like, hey, I have a secret I want to show you. And she takes her to the secret tree and she's like, watch this. And she sticks her entire arm into the tree and gets like a jar of fresh honey from the beehive. And the bees are like totally okay with it because it's her. And Ruth is like, that is scary, but cool. And then they're like in love. They're so in love. And it's beautiful and it's wonderful. But then Ruth has to move back to Georgia to marry this man named Frank Bennett. And Iggy is like, how could you do this to me? And Ruth is like, I have to do this. I can't explain why. And Iggy is like, well, fuck off. Like, I never want to see you again. Like, how dare you break my heart in this way? Yeah, she says she never wants to see her again. This is a lie. She drives over to Georgia like several times just to like see how Ruth is doing. And it speaks to her once, but she learns that Frank is abusive, but Ruth is staying because Frank is essentially paying for her mother's medical care. Shortly after this, Iggy receives a package in the mail, which includes the obituary for Ruth's mother, and also a Bible verse, which is from the book of Ruth. And it says, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Which is essentially marriage vows, right? Whatever. It's all very romantic. She sends her the note, and Iggy is like, come on, boys, we're going to get her. I gotta go see about a girl. So they drive to Georgia, like her and some of her brothers and Big George, and they like. And Ruth is like, they're waiting for them, and they all hop in the car. And Frank is like, what the fuck is going on? And Iggy is like, if I ever see you again, I'll fucking kill you. Yeah, and it's all very triumphant. They come back to Whistle Stop. The Threadgood parents like sit Ruth down and they're like, yo, I'm so glad that you are my daughter's girlfriend. Love this. We love it. We're so happy about it. And then they sit Iggy down and they're like, hey, you have a wife now. You better step the fuck up. Here's some money. Go open a business. So they do. They open the Whistle Stop Cafe, like right near the railroad stop. And Ruth was pregnant at the time when they rescued her, so they raise her son together. And the cafe becomes a sort of like focal point for the town, like the major watering hole where like everybody gathers and like major events happen and et cetera, et cetera. So that is like the main story of Iggy and Ruth. We have a lot of other characters. I'm just going to run through like some of the major events and characters that happen alongside this. Sipsy is a Black woman who lives with and works for the Threadgood family. She has a sort of storyline where she always wanted a son, and then they eventually like there is a baby that needs to be adopted, and she is able to adopt him, and his name is George, and he is very strong, so they call him Big George. And the two of them, Sipsy and Big George, run the kitchen at the cafe eventually. So Sipsy like does most of the cooking, and Big George does the barbecuing. George marries a woman named Anzel, and they have 3 children. 4 children. Artis, Jasper, Willie Boy, and Naughty Bird. Artis moves to Birmingham, and he is like a big ladies man, and he's sort of like in and out of jail, but like very lovable. He's having a great time in Birmingham. He loves Birmingham so much. That is like a major character trait of him. Jasper becomes a train porter because he loves trains. Yep. and he has a daughter named Clarissa eventually. Willie Boy fights in World War II, comes back, enrolls in law school, but then gets in a fight and is later murdered by another soldier. Naughty Bird, like, has a big crush on this guy, and she is like convinced that if she gets white enough, like, he will love her. So she tries to like lighten her skin, and it doesn't work. And she's like worried about it for so long, and then she finds out that he has died, and then she's immediately like, oh fuck that, like, I can be myself now.
Mhm.
So then she's like, has a great life as
Mhm.
herself, which is awesome. So though that is Sipsy's family. Buddy Jr. is Ruth's son, who is raised by Ruth and Iggy. He gets hit by a train at a young age as well, which is like stressful. But it's okay. He doesn't die. He just loses his arm. And he starts going by Stump so that people don't make fun of him for losing his arm. They're like, let's get ahead of this. I don't know, he has a sort of idyllic childhood with his two really cool moms. And he becomes a big football star, and he marries Peggy, who's the daughter of the doctor in the town, I think. um, Grady Kilgore is the town sheriff and a childhood friend of Iggy's. At one point he comes to Iggy and he's like, hey, you need to be careful because, like, you're serving black people at the cafe and the KKK is mad about it. And she's like, you're in the KKK, you dumb fuck. Like,
I've seen your shoes, bitch. Like, what are you?
yeah. She's basically like, I'm absolutely not going to put up with that. And like, if you are my friend at all, then you will shut this racist shit down right now.
Mhm.
Which we can come back to later, because the whole sort of dynamic around that is really something. There is a rotating cast of like train jumpers that stop by the cafe, most notably a guy named Smokey Lonesome, who becomes really good friends with Iggy and has a big crush on Ruth. And he's sort of like in and out of the story, just like being a nice grizzled man,
Mhm.
like Bob Dylan chic. And he eventually dies, I think, in Michigan.
Yeah.
There is a local legend named Railroad Bill who allegedly like loots the freight trains and tosses out like canned food and stuff for the black townspeople to pick up for free. It is later revealed only to the readers and Ruth and Stump that Railroad Bill is actually Itchy in blackface, which is really interesting. She's like, getting on the train and getting all the food for the people. Um, at some point, Frank Bennett, Ruth's husband, disappears, and a detective from Georgia starts looking around for him. They eventually find his truck in Whistle Stop, and Iggy is arrested and put on trial for the murder because literally everybody heard her say that she was going to kill this man. But the town reverend, who has been a lifelong enemy of Iggy's, ends up fabricating an alibi for her because she helped get his son out of jail. And the whole town is like ready to stand up for her, so she is let off. At the end of the book, it's revealed that Sipsy is actually the one who killed Frank by hitting him with a frying pan because he was coming to try to kidnap Ruth's baby. Ruth ends up dying of cancer at a pretty young age. Anzel is like her bedside nurse and assists her with sort of having a more painless death, like eases her into death. And by the time we get back to the outside framing device, like the railroad has left the town of Whistle Stop, so most of the town's businesses have closed down and the people have moved away. But we do get a little hint at the end of the book that Iggy and one of her brothers, Julian, are both alive and running a food stand in Florida. That's about it. Did I miss anything major?
Hold on, I'm going through my quotes just to make sure. I don't think so.
There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of characters like I didn't even name here, but I feel like that like gives you a sense of the ensemble.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of stories that are like very masterfully interwoven. like there were so many points in this book. If we're just going to jump right into the first thoughts portion of our podcast, there were so many moments when I was reading this that I could like feel like my heart rate going up, and I was like, oh my god, it's happening, because there were like so many times where like people's, you know, storylines would touch, or they would interact, and you could see how like one thing caused another thing. And I like just absolutely love when an author is really good at doing that, and Fanny Flagg is a fucking master. Oh my god, it was incredible. I texted you when I finished this book. It was Monday morning. And I finished it, and like I read the last line of the book, and I think that was something about like this little girl who had bought honey off of Iggy when she's like running her roadside stand in Florida or something. And then I turned the page, and it was like Sipsy's recipes from the Whistle Stop Cafe, and I just like sobbed, like burst into tears. I cried, and it has, I think this is my favorite book that we've ever read for this podcast. The Night Tiger was up there at number 1 for a really, really long time. But I think Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe has replaced it finally. I think it started out a little bit slow, but once you get, I don't know, I feel like maybe like a quarter of the way in, it's so interesting, and there's like so much depth behind all of the characters, and the way that it's like there's so many, I don't know, the found family trope is there, and like the what's it, like a non-traditional household, like there's a bunch of like non-traditional families, non-traditional households, non-traditional relationships, that sort of thing. So like reading through that is really interesting, and then like being able to identify with Evelyn and the character development that she goes through, and then also like just the way that all of these characters in this sort of like large family of people will absolutely like go so hard for each other.
Absolutely
like,
ride or die. Yeah.
Absolutely legitimately ride or die. Like there are 2 separate murders in this book. For like shit. The first one, I think the first one's Frank, and then the second one, I can't remember what it was, but some other guy died, I think, for like threatening somebody else's son, or like beating up somebody's son or something like that. It was insane. It was, I don't know, it makes you like Evelyn, it makes you want to kind of like be in Whistle Stop. It makes you want to like experience all of this. Like I want to go like drive around Birmingham and Irondale and just like stare at all of these places that are named in the book. I want to go like get a hot dog from Gus's Hot Dogs. Huh? Was it good? It was a good hot dog. Okay.
Amazing.
Oh, God damn it, Trevor. I forgot what I was going to say. And then, and then when the story is ending, you kind of like grieve along with Evelyn as well, because you're like losing these characters, and you're losing like, I don't know, this story and its ending, and you have to kind of like also cope with the fact that these people are gone and that like new things are starting. And 10 out of 10. I had a great time.
I love that. Yeah, keep an eye out. That's a strong drafties contender.
Yes.
And you had like no familiarity with this at all going into this,
Absolutely right? Not. You were like, the movie, and I was like, what movie? I don't know what you're talking about. Right.
Yeah, which is wild. I had seen the movie, which is like a pretty good movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't really think much of it. It's just like a nice Southern story in the movie. And then I started reading this book, and I believe I texted you like, I cannot stop reading and I cannot stop crying.
Which was my favorite, because you were literally like on Fire Island.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was morning. We were getting ready for the debauchery to come. Yes, but yeah. So I had seen the movie. You know, I had seen Kathy Bates and Evelyn's story is pretty much the same. But the depth of every single character is something that really, really doesn't translate and really overwhelmed me when I was reading it. Also, the movie very much like goes out of its way to be like, wow, friendship. This is a movie about female friendship. This is a movie about women who are friends. And the book is not that. I mean, it's definitely about friendship between Evelyn and Ninny for sure. But it's also about gays.
The very much romantic relationship. The homosexual romantic relationship between Iggy and
yeah. And I was thinking, well, while we were reading this, like there's a big genre, a big like category of books that's known as Southern Gothic, right? But I think that this falls into another like very prevalent category that I don't know if has a name, but I'm going to call it Southern Optimistic, which is just like this sort of idyllic Southern town where, like you said, like everybody really, really loves each other. And it's like racism exists, but it's not as heavy on the characters as it would have been in a reality, I think. Especially in relation to like the way the KKK is handled in the book. I didn't love, but like that's not to say that the book doesn't handle race well, because it's like it's there, but like I said, I feel like it's like Southern Optimistic. It's like this perfect little community where everybody like genuinely just fucking is supporting each other, which is like really nice to read. And yeah, I think like we were saying, like all of these characters have so much depth. Like there is just such a massive cast of characters, and all of them are completely different, have totally different like wants and needs and lives, all tied up by this little cafe, which is really, really sweet. I loved it a lot.
All right. The one thing that so the book is called like Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. I feel like at the Whistle Stop Cafe is kind of like a subtitle, but so I feel like food as it pertains to like relationships is a really big thing in like Southern culture, and like especially in Alabama. And like yes, these relationships like revolve around the Whistle Stop Cafe, but like I don't know, I suppose that I expected, and not like this isn't a criticism, but like I expected food to be a little bit more of a part of it, I guess. But it was really nice to have those recipes in the back. I don't know if I have a question. I am just thinking out loud at this point in my life. Because you kind of see like the relationships develop within the cafe, and like the way that like Iggy and Ruth like feed some of the like poor Black townspeople or homeless population that like comes in on the trains. Like those relationships are made through food, but there's not a whole lot of like sharing meals, I feel like, unless I am missing a big shared meal that you can remember.
Yeah, I don't remember necessarily a big shared meal. I think, yeah, like you said, like a lot of it takes place at the cafe. Like people are eating, but it's sort of like a background thing. I did realize that I forgot to mention in the summary, it is implied that after Sipsy kills Frank Bennett, he is barbecued and served to the detective from Georgia.
Yes.
Which is great.
Really also, she decapitates him and buries his head
in their garden. Yeah.
Yes. Which is not supposed to be funny, but he was a shit person, so I'm fine.
But yeah, you're right. I guess there's not as much like focus on the way that people are interacting through food. I'm thinking a little bit about the scene where Iggy gets the honey for Ruth
Mm-hmm.
and how that becomes sort of a trope for them. Like Ruth like makes a joke about her being a bee charmer, and then that's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like a touchstone for them, which is a little bit about food, but not entirely. I don't know.
Yeah, like Evelyn and Iggy almost come into contact because Evelyn stops at Ruth's grave in a cemetery when she's going to visit Ninny, and she realizes that she sees like a little note from Iggy, that, or a little note that says like something like love the bee charmer or something like that, but she didn't find Iggy, which I think was appropriate because I feel like her not actually meeting like Iggy and this
Yeah.
like persona that she had made of her, and her kind of like looking up to Iggy so much, I feel like that's appropriate. So she kind of gets to still like form her own personality and like be the strong Mary Kay saleswoman that she is. Yeah. What do you think about Evelyn and her character development?
I really enjoyed it. Some of the reviews that I was reading were talking about, I don't know. The reviews I was reading had a lot of like dumb shit to say that I disagreed with. But a couple of them like suggested that the book was a little bit fat phobic because of how it deals with Evelyn's weight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like have the authority to make a judgment on that, but I didn't feel that way when I was reading it because it felt very realistic in terms of like the way that she was always worried about gaining weight and like struggling with her body image.
Mm-hmm.
But it was never sort of suggested that she was actually like that it was like actually a bad thing for her to gain weight, or that like her weight was
Mm-hmm.
actually a problem. It was just like the way that she was interacting with it that
Mm-hmm.
she was having so much trouble with. Um and yeah, she's like a compulsive snacker, and like that is something that I really relate to. Like when I get very depressed or very anxious, like I used to eat like like several Hershey bars
Mm-hmm.
almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would buy them in bulk.
I know you would. I've
Which
seen it.
yeah, you know, it's a part of my past.
Yeah.
But so yeah, like reading that and reading like her dealing with that was very, very realistic to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed, first of all, like her being able to sort of reconcile that she was just dealing with like menopause and like a very normal like physical thing was affecting her that she like because of the way she was raised like had never really had the ability to consider. I thought that that was a really cool sort of plot line. But also yeah, like the fact that she's able to find satisfaction in herself instead of like putting it all into her marriage. I don't know. I thought it was a really nice form of character development, and especially for like the sort of Southern women that I feel like are the audience for this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. I really love the scene she goes to. So Evelyn like creates this persona. She's kind of like accosted in a parking lot where this like teenager calls her a fat cow or something. And in response to that, she kind of like crafts this persona named Tawanda, who she like imagines
Oh god, yeah,
like
I didn't even remember to include Tawanda.
Tawanda, a hero over time, who she always like imagines beating up or like killing people that she deems like, you know, sexist or, you know, bad people or some way. Anyway, she has this experience where she goes to a church, and it's because she had promised Ninny Threadgood that she would take her troubles to the Lord. And so she's about to go to like her regular church, and then she decides that she wants to go to the black church instead. And so she goes and she like feels like very out of place because she's the only white woman there. There's a quote where it says she realized all of her life she had looked at blacks or black people, but she had never really seen them. These women were good looking, thin brown girls with cheekbones like Egyptian queens and those big, magnificent looking balloon breasted women. And I really loved reading all of these like observations and interactions that she had inside of this church, especially towards the end. It says Evelyn took a deep breath and the heavy burden of resentment and hate released itself into thin air, taking Towanda along with them. So she kind of like releases this persona, this like protective persona that she has created, and she realizes that she's free of that. And then later it says, as she left the church, she turned at the door and looked back one last time. Maybe she had come today hoping she could find out what it was like to be black. Now she realized she could never know any more than her friends here could know what it felt like to be white. She knew she would never come back. This was their place. But for the first time in her life, she had felt joy. And I really love that she included that, like, she had come here and she was like really glad that she'd had this experience. But she knew that this was like a space for not her. And so she was going to go somewhere else. And so I don't know, I loved literally every single sentence of this chapter. This was probably one of my favorite chapters in the entire book. And thank you.
Yeah, I also loved that. And like you're describing this idea that she is able to sort of learn from this experience, but also recognize that it's not, it doesn't exist for her to learn from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she can't, like, it's not like their job to help her realize. Yeah, exactly. It's just, oh, it's good. It's so good. I really enjoy Evelyn's character development. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that could maybe lead us into a discussion of like how the book handles race in general.
Mm-hmm.
Because first of all, my number one complaint about the book, like, if I could change one thing about the book, they, like, Iggy should not have been Railroad Bill. 0% chance should, like, Railroad Bill being in there, not a problem. And then I get to the scene where we find out it's Iggy, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me with this, like, white savior bullshit? Like, Iggy, first of all, I think is a really interesting character because she's very kind and generous, but also like a little bit of an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And she a lot of times she deals with her problems by like drinking or like running away or like making these non-ideal choices. So I think like in general the book does a good job of making her like admirable but flawed.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, this is just a little bit too much of like white savior. Like, it felt like unnecessary. They could have just never told us who it was. You know?
Yeah, I agree. As far as like race in general, I read a review on Goodreads, I think, where somebody talks about how they think that the book is really, really racist. And I'm not going, like, if they feel like the book is racist, like, that's their opinion. I'm not here to say like they're wrong. I do think that for the time period that the book is set in, I feel like the interactions that people have and the choices that they make are like in character for that time period, I suppose. I think especially like the interactions that Iggy and Ruth and the other characters at the Whistle Stop Cafe have with the KKK. It's like, it sucks that the KKK is like a presence in the book, but it feels good that they kind of have these like small victories over them. And it, I don't know. I mean, I think that Flagg did a good job with how she treated race and race relations in this book. but also I'm not going to like speak over other people's opinions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it was like, I think that the Black characters are very like well written in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that there is a large, like there's a lot of Black characters and they're all
Mm-hmm.
very like different and layered and interesting. Um the way that the KKK is included, I'm sort of torn about
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like the book can't decide how much of a threat they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a scene where the Georgia KKK shows up and it's very scary and they beat Big George. But then there's also this moment with Grady Kilgore and the local KKK, and Grady Kilgore is like not a character we're supposed to hate.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a character we're supposed to sort of like. And it's this dynamic that like I agree probably is realistic for the time, but it's this dynamic where it's like, okay, like we know all these dudes are in the KKK and we just like accept it. That's just like
Mm-hmm.
their stupid little racist boys club, and it's not like an actual threat to the town because they don't actually do anything besides their parades. And that depiction made me a little bit uncomfortable. Because like I said, I do think it was probably accurate for like how people interacted with it at the time. Because it's like you're like having a racist grandpa, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
like maybe you just like ignore
Yeah.
that part of them. But I don't think that they actually were harmless. Like even if they weren't actively violent, like pushing that ideology is
Yeah.
harmful, and was harmful at the time, and was like maintaining a status of living that was not that was a big fat problem essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and so I was a little bit uncomfortable with the way we're just supposed to like forgive these characters who are actively participating in hate groups.
Yeah. I think it is like, I don't know, living in the South.
Yeah.
I feel like I am not like constantly confronted by people who are in the KKK, but um, confronted, not confronted by, but like realize that I am interacting with a person who holds opinions that possibly also someone in the KKK would hold, right? And I I am not saying that it is like correct that they just kind of like ignored their racist KKK friends like you would kind of like accept or ignore your racist grandpa, but it is like in the moment having an interaction with a person like that, like it is so easy to kind of like revert into the more like cowardly part of yourself and kind of just like try to ignore that and like continue on with the interaction and then like get the fuck out of there versus like confront them on their ideologies and try to challenge that. And like on one hand is that a conversation that is worth having, and then on the other hand, like what um what do I need to face in like myself to kind of like realize, to kind of, I don't know, be able to like challenge those kinds of people on their ideologies. um do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the cost benefit analysis, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
how
I mean, yes. And it's, I don't know, it feels like shitty to kind of like apply that to to this situation when there are like Black people who are like, hey, we're dying because of these opinions. But I get it, and I also am not like condoning that, but like I could see like why Iggy and Ruth, especially in that time, would kind of like just choose to ignore it and like be able to continue running their cafe and like feed the Black townspeople. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree. And that's why I'm saying, like, I don't think the depiction is unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
I was more uncomfortable with the way that, like, it's sort of presented like we as the reader
Yeah.
are supposed to forgive Grady for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also interesting, like, in the movie, I think that there's a little bit of a larger focus on like making the KKK bad guys. But the movie also cuts out like, I would say 60 to 70% of the Black characters.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, which is really, I feel like like very emblematic of like how Hollywood
Yeah.
handles that
Yeah.
kind of thing, where they're like, all right,
Absolutely.
well, let's put in this scene to like make sure everybody knows that we're not racist, but like any actual investment in Black characters is going to be a no from us.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So in conclusion, it's very complicated. And
In conclusion, don't be racist. Love Rough Draft, your favorite Bluesy Book Club podcast.
Yeah. And stand up to your racist friends. Other things.
Who would you want to have dinner with at the Whistle Stop Cafe?
Artist Peavy.
Okay.
Eva Bates.
Oh, Eva. Oh my god. I would love to take her out for a drink.
I'm okay, so I'm torn between Ruth and Iggy, right? Because like I can't tell if I have a big crush on Iggy or like I want to be Iggy and therefore I have a big crush on Ruth. Because yeah, I love Iggy's sort of like wild spirit, but I also like identify with her in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think that's Iggy, Eva, and Artis, and maybe Smokey Lonesome, just because he seems like a nice boy.
I was gonna say Smokey Lonesome. Yeah, I would do Smokey Lonesome, probably Sipsy, just to like talk to her. I don't know. I just feel like she's like such a lovely person. If I had to choose between Ruth and Iggy, I would probably choose Ruth. Because I think that you are Iggy and I am Ruth if we are going to like pick personas in this book. And then maybe Ninny, just so she can tell me some stories.
Yeah, I'm also like, we don't get a lot of Ninny's personality when she's young. And I'm curious about that.
Well, I was confused about like where Ninny came from as I was reading the book, because she was always talking about like what it was like to grow up in the Threadgood household, but she married into the Threadgood household.
Yeah.
And I like, until I was like looking up like background information and like going through like Goodreads stuff, I was so confused. And then somebody said like, oh, we don't really get any like information on why Ninny was like in the Threadgood household. And I was like, okay, so I was confused for a good reason. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it says sort of offhandedly at the beginning, like something about her parents dying.
Yeah.
And then she's just sort of there.
Yeah. And then she marries Cleo.
Also, okay, in the movie, at the very end of the movie, there is a moment where like it's sort of gently implied that Iggy and Ninny are the same person.
Yeah, I've read that. Yeah.
Which like already sort of doesn't make sense in the movie, but in the book
Mhm.
it's like so blatantly not
Yeah.
the case that I'm like, why did they do that? Like, why did they didn't have to do that?
Yeah. Like, there was no reason. I don't know. Maybe it's just like a
But like even
fun little.
even in the movie, she's like, she said something about marrying Iggy's brother. So I'm like, what?
Mhm.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. Um, shit, I forgot what I was going to say.
I like
Well,
that.
go ahead.
I like this bullet point that you have about stories / lives coming to an end,
Mm-hmm.
because at a certain point in the book, yeah, like all the characters start dying.
Mm-hmm.
Like Smokey Lonesome dies and Ruth dies, and a couple of other characters die. And yeah, it's sort of like a slow march towards the end of the book where like everything starts to wind down, and like the town is no longer really like functioning, because once the railroad stop goes away, like there's no economy to sustain it.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that sort of like really satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way the book deals with death, it's like not tragic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like it feel like, except for the, like in the case of Buddy, who died at a very young age. Um it feels like these characters like have lived their lives, and like their lives come to an end in the way that all lives do. um but yeah, for me it felt like a very sort of holistic, like respectful and almost reassuring way to deal with death. But I'm curious about what you meant when you put that bullet point there.
Yeah. I personally have a really, really hard time with endings and goodbyes. So I like felt the same kind of like sense of satisfaction of like, okay, like I see that we are wrapping up on these stories and they're all ending, and it feels very good to kind of be able to see this person's life from the beginning to the end, and know, you know, where everything ended up. um, but at the same time, like Evelyn, I think there's one point in one of her like parts of the book where she's narrating, where she thinks like she's very sad that people have to die, um, and that things have to come to an end. And I get that, because it was like very sad for me that like Whistle Stop was sort of, you know, people were moving out and the trains weren't coming through, and so all of these businesses were closing down. It was um it was hard for me, like, to have read this whole book and like developed relationships with these characters, and then just like know that at the end, that everything was going to end, I suppose. And I know that, you know, endings make way for new beginnings, and like there's the circle of life and everything. I don't know. It is a it wasn't, I don't know, necessarily reassuring. It felt like a um wise, I guess, almost is the word that I'm looking for. Or like it just felt like this is the way that things are, and like I kind of have to accept it, of like things come to an end and there's nothing I can do to stop that. And instead of that being more of an anxious statement, that felt more of like um a more calmer statement of like somebody who is, you know, in their older years being like, hey, it's gonna happen, listen. It's just, you have to accept it. um I like I would literally sit in bed when I was a kid and like become incredibly anxious, and like to the point of tears over the fact that I was going to die one day, like all the time. As I was trying to fall asleep, I would just be like filled with intrusive thoughts of like, one day you will be like in a nursing home or on a hospital bed and then you'll die, and it would scare the shit out of me. Um, And so that, like, those kinds of feelings also came back as I was reading about everybody's like life ending. I don't know. So it was a really complicated feeling for me, long story short, I guess. But I do appreciate the way that all of the like endings to the stories were handled. And I do feel like satisfied by the way that everybody's loose ends were wrapped up, I suppose. It's, like I said, I just have a hard time with saying goodbye to characters and people and anything.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I have sort of the opposite relationship with the concept of death, where I'm like, thank God I'm gonna die someday. Like, that is such a comfort to me to know that someday everything ends.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what a beautiful concept. Even if Dr. Manhattan would disagree. But yeah, that's really interesting that we had such sort of the different relationships with that trope.
I feel like that's like crucial to our friendship, is that we're like, oh yeah, we're the same on like 97 out of 100 things and like three very critical
profound
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else to wrap it up?
Are you going to make one of Sipsy's recipes? I was going to say, oh my God, if we were in the same city when we read this, we could have had a drunk kitchen and made like Sipsy's biscuits or something like that.
I mean, gotta make the fried green tomatoes, right?
Yeah.
Story time, recently was in the same room as Kirsty, and I made fried eggplant, and somebody accused it of being fried green tomatoes, and I was like, excuse me, you live in Birmingham, like, please get your shit together. Maybe I'll make the chicken and dumplings.
Yeah.
I often have a hard time with like homemade dumplings, so maybe that would help me.
All right.
Anyways, if you guys want to talk to us about recipes or Birmingham, Kirsty's your authority there, or this book and how it made us cry several times, you can reach us at roughdraftpodcast@gmail.com, Rough Draft Podcast on Instagram, Rough Draft Pod on Twitter, and just Rough Draft on Facebook. And you can leave us a review on whatever podcast app you use.
Yeah. Only if it's a nice review, though. Other reviews are not accepted.
If you have negative thoughts, you can email those directly to us.
Just keep them to yourself. No, but next week we'll be reading Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard, which I am very excited for. Yeah, it'll be a good time. We'll have to decide which one of us is Rosencrantz and which one of us is Guildenstern.
Oh my God. Ooh. Yeah, I cannot contain my excitement about that. All right, listen, I read a lot of reviews for this book, and like a lot of them were talking about how much better they think the movie is than the book, which is just
patently untrue.
so abjectly incorrect.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you one of those reviews. It's from KMS. They gave it 1 star. So disappointed is the headline. They said, one of my favorite all-time movies. Because I loved the movie so much, I decided to read the book. And I do understand that the book was first. But once I realized that Iggy and Ruth were gay, I was done. So glad I watched the movie first. And no, I'm not homophobic. I just didn't appreciate such a difference in the characters and story. The movie will always be in my top 10. 1 star.